Welcome to ES Ascension News. Soul Psychology. Dear Ascending Family, the controllers desperately want us to forget that we have souls. Even though we exist in a material world filled to the brim with many different kinds of souls, spirits, and consciousness, they would like us to forget our soul. Tyrants cannot control our mind as easily if we know how to connect with our soul. Without understanding the worldwide agenda of trauma-based mind control, we cannot understand our participation in the constructs put in place to keep it going. We become unknowing participants in perpetuating these systems. It is difficult to witness how many people on the spiritual path and how many practitioners and session providers have this blind spot and are unable to see the pervasiveness of this agenda. This newsletter and podcast will be a bit longer in order to try and uncover this matrix of control piece by piece, so we can no longer be fooled by it. As an analogy, it is hard for those of us living today to imagine a time when surgeons did not understand germs or wash their hands. The first person to suggest a connection between invisible microbes and post-surgical infection was the laughing stock of his day. Yet, his patients did not end up with infections and recovered much faster. There is a connection between hidden forms of mind control and the fact that so many humans are caught in pain traps and are being unknowingly manipulated by their subpersonalities. When people become aware of this and can source manipulation, it ceases to have any control over them. They also understand why it is crucial not to react to others out of anger or violence, which invites these dark forces in. If we do not recognize and understand the dark forces, we cannot recognize and understand the light forces. The border guards monitoring the matrix. We live during a time on the planet when the language used for public discourse, attempting to give some kind of expression to the existence, nature, and experience of the soul, spirit, or God, is twisted and manipulated in order to distort its true meaning. When these consciousness experiences are described anywhere in the mass media, they are immediately discredited, labeled as delusions in order to be discredited, or quickly defined and moved into the category of religion. Those behind global mind control do not want humanity to have the clarity, virtue, strength, or peace that is gained from developing consciousness through exploring the inner spiritual relationship that comes with the soul. They want to lull humanity into the great sleep of unconsciousness. The main controller pillars of society expend tremendous amounts of resources to keep the human mind occupied on external and material things that keep us distracted and unable to look within. Distracting our mind with intense fears of survival removes the creative potential for discovering our direct consciousness relationship with God, soul, and spirit. To advance survival fears and poverty consciousness, the masses are brainwashed with very specific and limiting belief systems, which conveniently act as the self-enforcement policy for the consciousness enslavement of others. Humans in all cultures and walks of life, are mostly taught to victimize and ridicule people that want to explore ways to think for themselves. The fields of science and medicine are aggressively monitored and regulated, as these mainstream world establishments are used to reinforce a variety of anti-soul ideological beliefs into the public to help serve the negative alien agenda. The anti-soul belief system requires terminating progress or credible evidence, which could prove that states of consciousness or soul exist. This includes the consistent elimination of the acquisition of any evidence-based knowledge that recognizes nature, animals, and other life forms as fully sentient beings. There are many areas in scientific investigation that are not approved for public dissemination, and thus white paper research in these fields are heavily controlled and compartmentalized. During and after the World Wars, aggressive social engineering agendas were put into place by the negative alien agenda controller secret societies through the medical and scientific communities that had started to form the field of psychology. Consequently, the academic and clinical disciplines of psychology use the medical model and are therefore pathology-oriented, which completely ignores the energetic reality of consciousness and the nature of the soul. During this ascension cycle, we must help each other to understand the implication that this has upon humanity, and to redefine the nature and existence of the soul inside psychology. This begins by understanding the history and the intentions behind the field of psychology that exists today. The soul is the essence of who we are, and it is that part of us which focuses upon the most authentic part of our true nature. For true healing to occur, the soul is the part of us that is the most powerful in effecting mental shifts and behavioral changes, and can greatly improve our self-esteem and self-confidence. The word psychology derives from Greek roots that define the study of the psyche, or the study of the soul. In China, psychology grew from the philosophical works of Lao Tzu and Confucius, and was further developed from the doctrines of Buddhism. This body of ancient knowledge involves exploring the deep insights that can be drawn from personal introspection and holding a pure observation of the external. These mental practices are what help to grow a strong inner core and spiritual foundation by developing observer consciousness. Ancient wisdom teachings are about practicing techniques for focused thinking and acting with an emphasis on purifying the mind in order to increase the virtue and power of the soul. Prior to the late 1800s, the study of our inner mental life was the study of our soul and the inner workings of our deepest self or essence. This is the true meaning of soul psychology, a system of understanding which allows for the necessary integration between the functions of the mind and the soul, acknowledging and supporting the human consciousness framework into harmonious coexistence. Soul psychology is an important tool for helping us to retrain our mind from being easily taken over by external forces and other people. We learn to refocus ourselves to shape our mind to become subservient to our true soul purpose, which makes us stronger people. For these reasons, soul psychology is an important basic key for supporting humanity's consciousness growth in spiritual ascension. Becoming truly self-aware and conscious is dependent upon our ability to listen to and gain the intelligent wisdom of our own body, mind, and soul. They will help to inform us about our true nature so that we can consistently improve our internal coherence and strengthen our moral character. Mainstream psychology. Current mainstream psychology is the study of behavior, thoughts, and the functions of the mind, which attempt to explore concepts that include all aspects of the conscious and unconscious experiences that make up the current human condition. Many people believe that the current field of psychology has the ultimate goal of creating a more improved and humane society. However, without the necessary components to allow the integration and comprehension of the structure of the soul, psychology remains completely antiquated in addressing the real and varied impacts that the mind has upon the soul. To intentionally disconnect the existence of the mind from the existence of the soul is extremely destructive and damaging to all human beings. This fact is what contributes to the manifestation of disconnected and chronically miserable people who intentionally create harm without moral conscience. Soul-disconnected people behave in a similar manner to artificial intelligence robots, as they are shaped by mass media to make decisions based on survival and selfish desires, with no authentic thoughts or emotional states of their own making. Disconnection conveniently pushes forward the basic agenda of psychology to be very effective in furthering the transhumanism agenda. Today, if people are unhappy and disconnected from their mind and soul, they are given a pharmaceutical drug to take control over their bio-neurological system functioning, which leads to lifelong pharmaceutical dependencies and addictions. Administering synthetic drugs to impair bio-neurological functioning of the brain further impairs and damages the soul body, making it nearly impossible for a person to experience soul embodiment or perceive the nature of their soul. The soul body is made up of a complex webbing of energetic receivers which connect to the central nervous system and brain wiring. Inducing certain artificial stimulus into the central nervous system and the brain will short-circuit the soul body and brain receivers, effectively damaging the wiring connections that transmit electromagnetic signals. This is common in people who hear voices in their mind after they have had some kind of extreme trauma reaction to drugs or hospitalization. Thus, applied psychology, without understanding the real existence and nature of the soul, easily leads to biological and social engineering experiments of mind control by prescribing drugs and carrying out therapies that shut down the energetic receivers that exist between the brain, body, and soul. Organized religion and scientific atheism are both schools of thought imposed by the negative alien agenda, which result in indoctrinated humans that suffer from the control system that extremely polarizes thinking. Each side of the opposition present an all-or-nothing model, that severely limits the scope of human intelligence. The agenda is to keep people arguing in circular debates with no resolution, so that we waste our energies being distracted by ineffective projects or topics that lead nowhere. Political and financial interests dominate angry egos, jostling for status or position, over finding the common ground that unites us to put our collective energies into serving humanitarian causes. We must stop contributing to the deadlock and become a positive cause in finding the common ground by focusing on the much larger picture. Always speaking compassionately and kindly towards others is the best place to begin the dialogue. The soul and mind coexist together in an energetic reality that greatly influence each other, independent of any religious doctrine or scientific dogma. If you are incarnated in a human body on the earth, it means that both the experiences and the structures of the mind and soul are intricately enmeshed with your true consciousness. The soul body is not ruled in its natural existence by any form of religion, just as the mental body is not ruled in its natural existence through any form of psychology. Humanity must get past the limitations of polarized thinking and engaging in circular debates that label people who experience their personal soul nature as religious zealots or as delusional, as well as opening their hearts to the potential existence that the soul is consciousness energy, which can be measured and quantified in the day-to-day activities of sentient beings. Impacts of scientific atheism. The global mind control agenda wants all humanist philosophies or direct experiences with our soul, spirit, or God defined and cataloged by one of their belief control system intermediaries: religion, medical, New Age, scientific atheism, or transhumanist community. Any one of these storefronts will do. According to some scientists and technologists, soul, spirit, or God is a delusion made up by ignorant, superstitious people that use religion as a crutch to cover up their own denial and fears of humanity's inevitable destiny with death. If we observe the wars, violence, and destruction wielded by church-going religious megalomaniacs throughout history, the reasons are clear that many educated, scientific, and rational minds abandoned the tyranny that they found in religion and promptly replaced it with some newer version. Although in some atheistic circles, the goals are to promote a humanist world society based upon credible scientific evidence, which is noble and sincere, it cannot achieve beneficial forward progress without acknowledging the vast existence of the non-visible spiritual energetic realms, such as acknowledging the existence of the soul. Atheism seeks to terminate the power abuses of religious-based prejudices made through the imposition of their own brand of confirmation bias, which is validated by the science community's version of informed consensus. Unfortunately, when people are disconnected from their soul through the rigid belief that they do not have one, they will not gain higher consciousness or higher sensory perception ability. In order to perceive beyond the illusions of the material world or third dimension, we must connect with our spiritual bodies. When we are connected to higher dimensions of consciousness while in a body, we greatly increase our capacity to perceive the many layers of the spiritual energetic nature of our reality. Thus, we know that informed consensus between the people on the earth does not yet exist. Earthlings have not been informed of the extraterrestrial nature of our real origins, or the regular intervention and control that is made in planetary affairs by the off-worlders. When the mass population is not informed of the truth in these matters and is continually lied to in order to base their existence on piles of mass deception, there is no such thing as informed consensus. Thus, scientific atheism has a critical relevance in shaping current systems that control beliefs in the mainstream areas of science, medicine, and education, which unequivocally affirm that we are alone in a cosmos devoid of supernatural realms. The anti-soul agenda seeks to create division through polarization of people's thinking into holding staunch oppositions that they will defend at all costs in order to win their argument. Their assertion is that there is no credible scientific evidence for the existence of a God, soul, or spirit. Yet, as we are well aware, there is no acknowledgement of the scientific evidence that validates and describes why and how we fall in love, how deep emotional bonds between people communicate telepathically, human communication with many kinds of supernatural forces and entities, transcendental, intuitive, and empathic consciousness experiences of at-one-ment, synchronistic events which hold deep meaning in our lives for no apparent logical reason, near-death experiences, proof of afterlife, or soul projection into other dimensions. Millions of people experience these kinds of consciousness experiences throughout the world every day, no matter what kind of belief system they have. Science, as it is being controlled today, will never be capable of explaining these consciousness experiences related to our soul with empirical data based on informed consensus. It is important to always remember there are beautiful and kind people that can be found within every kind of scientific or medical field. We need to focus on our common humanitarian goals and always be kind and compassionate to the people involved, no matter what their belief system. Thoughts impact soul colors. Our thoughts and the way that we think have a great impact upon others, as well as directly impacting the quality of light and frequency that our consciousness directs, which shapes and forms our soul and spiritual bodies. Positive and loving thoughts emanate intensely bright colors of high-frequency light, sound waves, and shapes that shift and oscillate within a spectrum of colors throughout the energy field. As the focus of those thoughts shift and change, the pattern of colors in the aura and the quality of light source also shifts and changes. The brighter and higher the frequency of light that is generated from our developed consciousness, the more strength and influence that light source has upon others, as well as uplifting the environment. Spiritually strong people have a strong inner light that is built upon a foundation of a strong, clear, and focused mind and heart. As the result of developing a strong, clear, and focused mind and heart, intensely bright consciousness light travels far and wide as it spirally reflects outwards from within a spiritually strong human being. Their inner light moves in many directions simultaneously to be absorbed by the souls that are located within the sphere of its energetic influence. When high frequency light and color is absorbed within the soul spirit body, the same color and frequency becomes a permanent part of its aura. Negative and unloving thoughts emit dull, gray, and dense colors of very low frequency light and sound waves. These negative thoughts can become things that gather into distorted and grotesque shapes, and sometimes grow to become entities littered throughout the energy field. These dull gray and black colors are dense and form a thick wall of black substance that inhibit or block the person from gathering in and circulating brighter light sources. A person with excessive negativity manifests a black wall that acts as a covering around their body that deflects and repels light away from them. In many cases, this kind of black force surrounding a human body attracts many kinds of negative spirits or satanic forces, which they coexist with and think is a part of their own identity. It is important to clarify that recognizing and discerning darkness, shadow entities, and black force substance when it is present in the field is not the same as contributing to negative thoughts and negative energies. When observing satanic entities or even those dark forces who attack starseeds and lightworkers regularly, the goal is to observe them as they are. Study their nature and understand that they are disembodied entities, suffering, and in bondage to tremendous trauma and pain. Starseeds must learn how to discern these dark forces so that they can deflect and neutralize dark attacks, as well as defending their right to exist on the earth. The New Age has taught many people to live in denial and only accept the existence of pure light-filled, benevolent, and loving forces on the earth. When we refuse to discern or acknowledge that the darkness exists as a type of consciousness on the earth, we allow ourselves to exist in denial and deception, which make us easy targets for dark force control and manipulation. As we spiritually mature, we will eventually access more of the truth spirit, which observes and discerns all of the varied energies, both dark and light, that make up the many realms of universal consciousness. Destructive thoughts form destructive doorways. When we allow ourselves to express negative thoughts or destructive emotions, these negative energies enter our body and aura through the doorway we have consciously or unconsciously created. When negative thoughts are amplified and made forceful through repeated, unchecked negative ego behaviors, the more volume and intensity of the related negative emotional energy and its essences will gather, When people obsess, ruminate, or loop in their mind about something that gives them feelings of anxiety or pain, this behavior grows negative energy, like gradually blowing air into a balloon. At some point, when it reaches maximum capacity, that balloon is going to pop, and the contents explode out into the environment. An example of when there is excessive negative energy accumulated is when a person loses control of themselves and explodes in a rage of intensely dark, negative reactions through an emotional outburst. Sometimes the person can appear momentarily possessed by these negative emotions, losing control of their personal faculties and not remembering the extent of their outburst. This situation is intensified when a person takes drugs, alcohol, or other consciousness-altering substances. When negative outbursts occur, the vibrating negative energy of that person's emotional experience is felt by negative spirits in the dark realms that have the same vibration of negativity. They are attracted to this vibrational essence and tune into the mind of that person before, during, and after the outburst. Once this negative connection is made, it can serve to amplify the negative thoughts and emotions to be carried out into even more destructive levels. The stronger and more forceful the negative thoughts become inside that person, the more likely it is they will give in to acting out these destructive behaviors, which are being amplified by negative spirits. That person may become rage-filled, and thus, in that moment, be unable to choose their reactions. They may act out destructive actions against themselves or others, even if it goes against their own belief systems. All intrusive negative thoughts and violence are emanated from the source of blackness that makes up satanic and dark forces, and these dark spirits are seen in and around all destructive actions. All actions of destructive violence and insanity that can be observed in the world today are the result of negative spirit influence or satanic possession of a person with massive spiritual wounding. These negative spirits coexist in our world from other dimensions in time and space, such as the underworld or dark realms. Negative spirits constantly attempt to take over the human mind and body, to use the human body, by placing the person in dark servitude in order to carry out the telepathically transferred agenda. Thus, all imposter spirits are negative spirits that use mind control and deception to achieve their goals through the manipulation of human beings at all 4 levels of their bodies while existing in the material world. This is a very real danger for humans in the exact moment of being emotionally triggered into negative emotions. To remain mentally and emotionally able to choose if that destructive behavior is truly being acted out by personal will or by allowing our mind and body to be controlled by outside forces. The critical importance of resisting these negative thoughts and destructive actions that are being falsely projected into our mind and body telepathically cannot be overemphasized. The tragic consequences of a person that allows themselves to be controlled by destructive thoughts or negative spirits, which further lead them to commit destructive actions, is that the energetic debt of that destructive action is now the responsibility of the person that has committed the action. If a person commits destructive actions, that person is now in the consent and authority with the dark forces that have mind-controlled them to commit that action. As the person carries out repeated spiritually destructive actions, he or she is now subjected to the physical laws or mind control that has been manifested by the dark forces, where that person will not recognize the soul or be protected by the natural laws of God through their own harmful choices. The soul is gravely impacted by carrying out destructive actions, and the aftermath of this destructive energetic residue is left recorded within the cells of the human body, therefore corrupting the energetic integrity of the entire body, mind, and soul. This is especially devastating to the soul when people commit depraved actions in the name of religion or serving their God, believing that they are committing these heinous acts of destruction in order to rightly justify their violent religious beliefs. These groups of destructive people bring extremely negative energies into their human body, which leads to the full-blown possession and bondage to these negative spirits, which manifests and aggressively spreads diseases throughout the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. Soul trauma and disease. There is a subtle balance that exists between the energies of the body, mind, and soul, which are responsible for the manifestation of states of health or disease in every person. Soul trauma and constant exposure to negatively stressful circumstances are the cause of all psychiatric disorders and many pathological diseases. Extreme states of stress that are created from negative energies and negative spirits will cause breaking points or soul fractures in the weakest links within our genetic record and accumulated cellular memories. When these energy fractures occur, they send electromagnetic signals to message in our cells, which record that imbalanced energy into our body systems, and this impairs the functioning of our body, mind, and soul. The imbalanced messaging changes the brain chemistry and body metabolism, which may cause a variety of injuries that will manifest from the genetic record of that soul's trauma. That weak link in the record of the soul's trauma is determined from the ancestral record or family genetic connections until these ancestral records have been cleared from impacting our spiritual bodies. Ancestral genes carry the links to the expression of the accumulated imbalanced behavior or emotions that are recorded in our cells, and that will determine the type of weakness, disorder, or disease that we are susceptible to having. Negative energies promote diseases, and if it continues without correction, it allows for further accumulation of negative emotional energy that deepens the state of disease into the bodily matrices. The determining factor of which kind of disease will manifest is genetically determined and is a function of the memories within our own unique genetics. Splitting the mind from the soul. Without this critical knowledge of the soul, psychiatrics as it exists today covertly exacerbates the negative alien agenda spiritual abuse conditioning through its social and biological engineering methods. Thus, it functions to reinforce medical care methods that induce mental body splitting, that ultimately create soul fracturing in the human public. Social engineering is a type of mind control that seeks to manipulate people from their own right to privacy into becoming knowledgeable and self-informed, so that the social structure can exploit them with misinformation that is used to take control of their behaviors. The primary method is applied via bullying, intimidation, and deception tactics through controlling perception and by generating personal or mass fears, real or imagined, in their targets. Thus, this includes an anti-soul agenda to enforce the basis of standard psychiatric medical care to be fully governed and regulated by only Western medical and military corporate conglomerate interests. These controlling interests only consider the revenue and resources generated from the physical pathologies that they have produced in order to diagnose the public using their catalog of pharmaceutically treatable disorders and diseases, inducing and maintaining disease states to create lifelong medical consumers not only greatly suppresses human consciousness, it generates multiple billions in revenue worldwide. The American Psychiatric Association, or APA, offers a common language and standard criteria for the classification of mental disorders in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM. The DSM primarily evolved out of the U.S. Army after World War II. It is currently used by every governing agency that is intricately connected to the many laws and policies that make up the current medical establishment, such as drug regulation agencies, pharmaceutical companies, medical insurance companies, clinicians, hospitals, the World Health Organization, as well as for military psychological profiling. Naturally, the DSM has tightly guarded copyrights that continue to make millions of dollars just from the publication and distribution of the manual itself. The combination of growing massive corporate medical and drug profits, damaging bioneurological functioning through prescribed pharmaceuticals, standardizing psychiatric diagnostic categories for dehumanization agendas, and medically treating humans as soulless entities, creates the perfect front for the negative alien agenda. This allows them to continue to enforce abusive standards of medical care that are intentionally used to split apart the mind from the soul, contributing to the creation of disconnected and violent humans. Medical professionals and patients are indoctrinated to commit and accept the abuse of their fellow human being as appropriate, while stripping them of their human dignity, choice, and well-being, all in the name of health care. The obvious motivation is that this greatly weakens and confuses many human beings, making them vulnerable to every kind of deception and dark manipulation. This leads to easy forms of mind control, social conditioning to accept anti-human behavior, taking mind-altering pharmaceuticals, believing that a pill will cure problems, serious suffering while in disease states, and finally, dark force possession. When we can comprehend the larger picture of what is happening on the earth, the reasons behind this dehumanization agenda in the psychiatric and medical field becomes clearer and clearer. Why would these structures be put in place with the image that they are designed to heal and help people, when the primary motivation of the structure is to make money from the continued suffering and disease of others? Have you noticed the reversals inside these structures compared to what they are actually marketed to represent? As an example, a medical research organization may represent themselves as devoting millions of dollars in grant money from drug companies toward finding a cure for cancer, but in reality, they do not want to find a cure because it's not profitable to the drug companies. It basically becomes a shell company to move money around to the people that play ball with the negative alien agenda. The answers lie behind the mechanisms that are used in society to disconnect people from their direct spiritual relationship with soul, through the same tactics used in satanic ritual abuse. Abusing spiritual principles to control minds. We define all forms of hidden, intentional deception and manipulation applied with the intent to control the minds of other people so that one believes the abusive content that is being projected into his or her mind is actually being generated from inside themselves as one clear definition of satanic ritual abuse. SRA is a trauma-based method used to achieve the result of completely controlling the mind in order to take complete control over people and further abuse their bodies and souls. Thus, within all structures of mind control used on this earth, the architects behind it abuse spiritual principles in order to isolate that system of control from the truth of God, soul, or spirit. Their agenda is to dehumanize all human beings by stating the soul is non-existent, degrading people purposely into not believing that they are spiritual beings, so that they will become animals that are only capable of animalistic reactions. This way, life itself is not valued or revered, thus committing torture and killing in all forms of life is made more easily socially acceptable. A very important principle to understand that is used to control all people on this earth by the dark forces of Satanism is to incite fear, anger, and confusion toward any concept that describes the nature of God, soul, and spirit. When people are continually subjected to forms of pain, trauma, grief, and loss, when they feel that their only choices are to be the victim or become the victimizer, then people can be easily manipulated to commit and enforce any kind of heinous behavior and depraved action. Through people's self-hatred, the dark spiritual forces of hatred are directed towards life and all things sacred to the nature of soul. This is expressed through people's lack of empathy, to which they have no moral conscience, to the pain, harm, and suffering that they create. These destructive beliefs and actions deeply wound the mind, body, and soul of that person, along with the people that have been subjugated to that dark influence or reign of terror. People, along with their inner child, may consciously or unconsciously be conditioned to believe that we are condemned to live in a hellish world designed by a hateful God that makes us suffer terribly because we are bad and sinful creatures. This is what many religions have told the masses. Thus, great efforts are made by the negative alien agenda in the global mind control scape to ensure that the people of Earth believe that God has rejected them, or that other people's gods are violent and evil and they must be killed, or that the nature of God and soul is non-existent and fabricated by the delusional minds of religious tyranny. This is the negative alien agenda mind control setup of humanity rejecting their inner spirit as God. When we hate God or hold fear-based concepts about the nature of God, we violently reject our own inner self and soul light through that same force of hatred we have been programmed with. The worldwide satanic ritual abuse agenda summation. Although unpleasant to comprehend, there is a worldwide satanic ritual abuse, or SRA, agenda, which promotes the main methods behind the archontic deception strategy that can be easily seen covertly operating in a variety of social structures, such as the medical system. Once we are informed by how this method works to create sociopaths, as it is reinforced in the unconscious minds of the people, we can safeguard and protect ourselves from being further manipulated. It is our informed awareness and spiritual commitment to serve our highest expression that ultimately protects us from being used and abused unconsciously. For this reason, we have summarized the basic recipe for grooming sociopathic minds through SRA methods. Trauma-based mind control for enslavement. Intentionally create conditions that manifest as much pain, torture, and trauma at the earliest stages of childhood, and reinforce and grow that trauma response into the stages of adulthood, so that spiritual abuse is normalized and accepted within the self, others, and in the societal structures. SRA is trauma-based mind control used to enslave people. Abuse spiritual principles to reject soul. Abuse spiritual principles in all forms of social control that isolate and disconnect that structure and its people from feeling their natural coexistence with unified spiritual consciousness. Intend to groom self-hatred and hatred for that which is most sacred in the spiritual principles of God. Condition people to unconsciously commit grave harm to themselves and to others without feelings of remorse or taking responsibility for personal actions. Introduce and reinforce a variety of anti-soul ideological beliefs into the public. SRA mind control is used to agitate people to get them to feel rejected, angry, and victimized, to desire retaliation against their oppressors or others they blame, which sets them up for the bondage loop of consciousness enslavement. Disassociate, fragment, and dehumanize people. When people experience extreme pain and trauma abuse, especially when trauma events are repeated and never given the ability to heal, they will disassociate from their body and the reality to get relief. At the moment of disassociation, they fragment in their mind, emotional layers, and spiritual body. This disconnects their light body layers and the functions between the mind and soul, which results in an energetically fractured, dehumanized, and extremely fragile self. Abused and abusive people have no sense of emotional coherence, personal boundaries, or self-respect, which allows for them to be easily mind-controlled and prepared for further dark infiltration and consciousness enslavement. The individuals are purposely dehumanized to think of themselves as animals and to behave as animals, or even less than. Generally, animals do not torture for sport. Dehumanized, they are easily fragmented, weakened, and confused. Attract and spread negative spirits and satanic forces. Painful spiritual fragmentation creates energetic splitting behaviors, which disconnects all components of the many layers that exist within the human being, separating aspects of their consciousness into different realms of time and space. An example is the agenda to split apart the inner female from the inner masculine consciousness to produce external sexual misery and misogyny. This internal split and fracture of the soul attracts negative spiritual entities that can form attachments. They take advantage of energetic weakness by manipulating that person's pain in order to gain further access to control some layer of their mind, body, or spirit. The negative entity feeds on the energy yielded from the source of pain that human being creates. This cycle of parasitism increases the spiritual wounding, which will produce sub-personalities. Produce alternates and sub-personalities to take control over the body. In severe cases of mental splitting, when the extreme pain drives that person into disassociation, at the moment the person disassociates from their body, the soul psyche manifests coping mechanisms to survive. To disassociate from the painful trauma felt in the body, the soul and mind will split into subpersonalities or create alternate identities. These are called alters. Disassociation and hidden alters with demonic binding are especially common in rape cases and with extreme physical brutality. The alters are hidden in the unconscious mind by the fears of the inner child, which act to protect the conscious mind or the physical body from perceiving any more painful trauma. Many times people cannot remember exactly what has happened to them until they have another major injury, or are hypnotically regressed, or brought into altered states of consciousness. It is common for the person to remember what happened to them many years later, because they have blacked out the time period where the extreme trauma abuse had occurred. Many people ignore past extreme trauma because they feel pressures to survive in the world. Alters can be unintentionally created from splitting during any kind of traumatic event, or specifically created and programmed as identity attachments that have certain belief systems. Alters that are programmed with specific belief systems can perform certain functions automatically and unconsciously when they are triggered into that specific behavior. Alternate identities are used in programming minds when blank slating or consciousness wiping methods are used. People that have many alters also have many satanic bindings to those alters, and they lose control over many aspects of their own mind, body, and soul as a result. Most people are not aware they have subpersonalities, and yet this is extremely common on planet Earth. The subpersonalities are what are easily suggestible to forms of mind control programming, and will act out these behaviors when they are triggered to do so. When people go unconscious and lose control of their mind or body, such as flying into rages where they cannot remember what actually happened, It is because they have an alternate identity that took control over their body. This alter is generally also being manipulated by a negative entity or satanic force. There are black military programs that create assassins to kill on command using trigger words based upon SRA programming methods of spiritual abuse. These can be partial attachments made to programmable alters or full negative spirit possessions. A person with hidden alters created through trauma abuse can easily flip-flop between many different profiles of personality that they show as a mask to the public. Essentially, they are actors and actresses in a movie that is being directed by negative spirits or satanic forces, in which they are not aware they are participating. Falsified projections for creating destructive acts, self-deception, and escapism. Negative entities, both human and non-human, intentionally create more pain and trauma in a person they perceive as weaker, to get them to commit actions that will place that person's mind and soul in bondage and servitude to their agenda. Victim-victimizer programming is reinforced throughout society to incite thoughts of disconnection and powerlessness. Negative entities act as the imposter, imposing on people's minds. They falsely project negative behaviors, images, and actions in order to get the person to believe that the harmful option is the only way out of their pain, trauma, or anxiety, or believe that the false projection is the escape path that will bring them bliss and happiness. The reality is that when the person commits the self-destructive action, it amplifies and accumulates painful energies, which makes the sensation of inner pain or addiction much worse. In cases of astral bliss, the person lives in a delusional state in order to avoid any discomfort or pain that would be caused if they were to really see the truth of what happened. Believing deceptive lies form demonic bindings and astral cords. Anytime we reject the truth to remain comfortable within our beliefs or from our fears of self-annihilation, we easily accept lies. When a person believes the negative thoughts they receive from a negative entity are actually coming from their own mind, and they act out that destructive behavior, the entity is successful in deceiving them. This manifests as splitting with astral cords or satanic bindings. Generally, entities use an emotional bait hook based on manipulating the type of pain or trauma that person carries. The dark force will bind itself to the wounds of that person through the consent that was made during the destructive behaviors that person has acted out in the past or present. When people allow negative and unloving people access to their genitals, sexual bindings and entities can also be passed through intercourse. Now that person is being drained and manipulated by a dark attachment that has corded itself to some part of that human's body, producing sociopaths and psychopaths. Finally, when the person reaches their breaking point and cannot take the painful trauma anymore, they disassociate and lose the ability to access emotional feelings through a broken and blackened heart. Some of these people reincarnate again and again in this wounded and splintered soul state, reliving the same traumas repeatedly. Maybe they use forms of escapism through drug use, addictions, or other ways to numb out and withdraw. Maybe they decide to be victimizers, to continue the abuse cycle, to inflict the incredible pain that they have suffered at the hand of others. One thing is certain, people are being used as pawns in the checkerboard SRA game of the negative alien agenda, and many are unaware of the spiritual reality in which we are living. The lack of empathy and compassion we have for ourselves, as well as for the many serious abuses that are committed against others, is what produces narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. When the human heart is broken and the soul is disconnected, it generates extreme distortions of sick and diseased behavior. These are the main goals behind the worldwide satanic ritual abuse agenda. Educating the spiritual community to compassionately witness. If we disregard the spiritual dimensions of mind control slavery and its history of experimentation on the human public as it is happening on the earth, then we are neglecting to see the foundations of the entire mind control system that stems from the negative alien agenda. Many of these SRA methods that relate to creating the desired results of mass human puppeteering were given to the Germans under Hitler by the Nordic aliens that are connected to the Black Sun programs. The primary vehicle for SRA programming is to incite total terror in their victims by finding ways to repeatedly invoke that terrorism and fear without reprieve from the pain and anxiety. To incite total terror into their victims, the SRA programmer and negative alien controller intends to gain absolute control over every aspect of that person. As a result, many SRA victims have deep phobias and powerful fears that they will never be believed that these horrific abuses have been committed against them. Many therapists that are trained in mainstream medicine and psychiatry severely traumatize SRA victims further by denying the authenticity of their experiences. Traditionally, psychiatrists have treated these victims as if their abuse is nothing more than psychotic delusions and nonsense, instilling in them even more traumatic feelings of guilt, shame, and fears of ridicule. For an SRA victim to overcome their incredible internal fears to tell the truth publicly, after many years of threats to not tell their story, is a humongous obstacle of pain for them to overcome. As a part of the spiritual community, we must become aware of the fact that rampant abuses are committed every day to the human race through a variety of SRA methods. The psychology profession is not equipped to address any of the mental or spiritual dimensions of humanity, let alone validate the existence of the incredible trauma involved in SRA. Total non-judgment and compassionate witnessing for these individuals is desperately needed, while being aware of the propaganda to tell the public that SRA does not exist and is a made-up fantasy from a group of psychotic people. The truth is difficult, but it is what sets us free, along with nurturing our direct relationship with the power of God's eternal loving spirit. All forms of denying the existence of the spiritual dimensions ultimately generates deceptive harm in our life. We cannot reject the very nature of what and who we are as spiritual beings, and must recognize that we are sharing this earth with many other kinds of spiritual forces. We have a physical body and mind, but they are interconnected and intricately enmeshed with our soul and spirit. Thus, we need to integrate all of our bodies to help bring them back into balance, to be able to heal the true heart of humanity. We pray that these words are united in one heart as consecrated to the sacred self-sovereign eternal light of God, held inside the love-light power of truth-telling and self-knowledge that is dedicated to serve the complete authority of the Christos Sophia. The fallen, the satanic hierarchies have no power or authority here under any impostor's name. We pray to God, to humanity's collective soul, and to the Holy Spirit of our cosmic and true Mother to release, transit, and purge all devices and structures used to promote suffering in human beings that connect them to the fallen entities of satanic spirits. You are cast out and have no authority here. We call upon the spirits of Christ, the spirit of purity, to flood this work and its energetic container to be fully represented in the eternal power and authority that is the cosmic Christos consciousness. May peace be with you in body, mind, heart, and soul. Please only take what is useful for your spiritual growth and discard all the rest. Thank you for your courage and bravery to be a truth seeker. I am God, sovereign, free. Until next, stay in the luminosity of your avatar Christos Sophia heart path. Please be kind to yourself and to each other with a loving heart. Until next month.